Many Christian leaders think that they've tried this missional living before, but you know what? I want to say, actually, you haven't. Maybe you've only tried religion, like new religion and new do-to-be activities, but hung hipper language on it. So, often folks that say they have tried to start missional communities, actually what they did was they tried decentralized religious activities. Oftentimes mini church services once a week with strict time constraints applied, like folks got to get their kids home, So anyway, they lay out a list of what folks are supposed to do when they get together, now make a missional, and then all this quickly becomes and feels like law. And then they wonder why no one's into it. And especially they're not yet believing friends who really want very little to do with these supposed new religious activities.
Welcome to the Everyday Disciple Podcast, where you'll learn how to live with greater intentionality and an integrated faith that naturally fits into every area of life. In other words, discipleship as a lifestyle. This is the stuff your parents, pastors, and seminary professors probably forgot to tell you. And now, here's your host, Caesar Kalinowski.
Hey, buddy, what's going on? How you doing?
I'm exhausted, man.
Well, what's up? What'd you do this weekend?
So we do family vacations, but we never do big ones. Like, we never do ones where we actually go out and spend a ton of money, and we've just never really done that. But we just got back from 2 days at Disney and 2 days at Universal Studios with my 4
restful, super restful.
5 hours of sleep crammed in a hotel room.
Oh my goodness! I've done it. Tina and I've done it. We did that, and then it was at Universal, I think.
Yeah.
We did all that stuff, and So I think we've done it multiple times. And I'll be honest with you, listeners, you can weigh in on this. Go to the Facebook group. But I'm not a huge theme park guy.
Me neither.
Yeah.
And
I think the thing behind the thing there is I'm selfish and lazy. Like I don't like standing in lines. In disproportionate amount to the joy received from standing in that line. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So stand in line for 20, 40, hour 40, whatever, and then going wee for like 40 seconds or a minute and 12 or whatever.
People sneezing coronavirus all over the rides and stuff. It's just not worth it.
I can't make fun of that. But you had fun, right?
Yeah, and I'm also looking for a third job. So unless people want to Venmo me, I got some debt now.
Oh, no.
It's not a cheap trip. Yeah, I mean,
no, they're not. Even if you get the super dealios. Now, did you say Disney World or Disneyland?
Disneyland. So we did the flights
Anaheim.
Yep.
Anaheim.
So 2 days there and then 2 days at Universal Studios.
I've done both. I've been to both.
Yeah, they're both really cool. Harry Potter World and all that.
That's
amazing.
New. Yeah, that's new, right?
Speaking of being missional, right? Trying to be missional.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about discipleship and missional living on this show. A lot. It's kind of our main jam.
Yeah, we talk about the gospel in all of life, which then sends us out on mission.
Yeah, It's the natural flow. And we often hear from leaders that say, "Oh, I've tried that missional thing," or "Oh, we tried it." And they've actually maybe tried even starting missional communities before, only to see it fail. And they'll have excuses like, "Well, it just didn't work in our church," or "Our people weren't really that into it," or I mean, what do you think is going on here?
You're right. I've heard it. I hear it probably every single day, right? Plenty of articles and all that stuff too. Well, there might be a lot of different reasons for why a missional community doesn't work or grow or like, whoa, it's full of life, or why a particular church doesn't embrace that way of living and see it work for them. But one thing I've seen a lot is, and it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy of inevitability, is it's kind of like this situation. The leaders in the church are not seeing their people engaged in their Sunday service like they used to be.
Sure.
They're seeing their people show up, 1 to 2 times per month for the service. That's kind of the national average now. They're seeing that too.
Yep.
They keep talking about the fact that discipleship's not really happening around here. Their people are not out making new disciples of Jesus. So they get to this place where they throw up their hands in the air and they agree to give this missional community or micro church thing a try, right? They've read about it. Someone on the staff or anybody in the church has kind of been bugging them.
Yeah, it's a sexy phrase for a while,
Yeah, trying to get them to read my book or whatever,
Sure.
But the leaders don't really end up knowing much about it. They don't get any training or help. And their people know usually even less about how to actually do it. They've not seen it modeled or whatever, how to be and make disciples in community. But they challenge their folks and task their best people, quote unquote, to start a missional community, right? Let's get out there. And the leaders themselves often don't engage this lifestyle.
Sure.
And so not much happens naturally. And then as it gets, a few months into it and maybe the weather starting to go cold or whatever, too hot or whatever, or school season changes, it all starts to fizzle out.
Hmm.
And no big surprise there really either. So you see the leaders and pastors now say, well, yeah, we tried that missional thing, we
Yep.
tried that missional community way of making disciples, but it didn't work here.
Sure.
And so, have you ever seen that yourself?
Yeah, even the last church that I served on, it was that push of like, hey, we think it's kind of a cool idea, and it might work for people. But one of the kickbacks I heard was from the pastor of discipleship going, how am I supposed to control what everyone's missional communities are doing? I'm just one person. And you go, well, that's
The
a
C word.
yeah. You're like, well, of course you're not going to do it because you're one person. Like,
Well, plus the Spirit of God is supposed to lead the church.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right?
Not
So-
methods. And yeah.
Oh, yeah. So,
And I know some people might say like it's an unfair sweeping, like a sweeping brush. But I have seen a lot of churches that even you suggest ideas and they're like, oh yeah, we've done the missional thing, it didn't work, or things along that line, which really are so
missional
frustrating.
doesn't work around here is kind of like saying discipleship doesn't work at our church.
Yeah,
It really
Jesus
is
wrong.
because
Yeah.
either you don't understand the term, right?
Yeah,
Which means missional just means like focused on disciple making, like primarily, boom, right? Or you don't really believe that the way God's gonna, fill the world with His glory is through filling it with Jesus.
Exactly.
So then I'm like, well, that's not a church anymore. Then that's a religious institution of some form.
yeah,
So anyway, and I know all this paints a pretty sort of broad picture of things. I mean, a little bit caricaturish. I don't intend to make anyone who has tried this look dumb or ill-intentioned. I really haven't.
sure.
But what I'm trying to say is, like, maybe you haven't actually tried missional yet. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Maybe, and because I've also seen a lot of pastors and leaders really give it a hard try, like solid, and themselves too, and their families, and they're in it for months, but they still come up short. So
So
don't take offense if this is you. I'm just saying maybe you actually haven't tried missional.
yeah, so like your opinion, like these people that have said that sort of stuff, like we've tried hard and whatever. Where do you think they're missing the mark? Like, what are they doing wrong?
Well, maybe what these awesome and well-intentioned leaders have actually tried is just more religion and new do to be. And if you listen to the show, you know what I mean by that. Like what you do equals who you are kind of activities, but with hipper language.
Yeah. Okay, so for those who might be newer to the show, we do talk about do to be quite a bit, but maybe we can unpack that again. Like, what are you meaning when you're saying, oh, they've just tried more religion and do to be activities?
Well, okay, so religion is man's attempts or our attempts to try and get closer to God. That's what religion is us trying to get to God, make Him happy, or earn a successful life from Him, right? Like
Yep.
appease Him or like, you owe me, right? It's ritual and obligation. It's working hard to be, okay, something like that God's already says is true of you, like
Sure.
loved or, like blessed, sharing His authority, all that, or having something that God has already provided for us. So we're working hard, even though God says it's yours and it's finished. So the gospel is about God's completed work to draw near to us and draw us near to Himself. And because of Christ's completed works, there's no doing needed for this to be true. It is true. It's finished. Jesus did it already. So attempts to do things because we're supposed to, or because that's what good or hipper Christians do,
Sure.
or as a last attempt to grow Jesus' church for Him, all of that is actually law and it's not grace. And so often folks that say they've tried to start missional community actually tried decentralized religious activities. Oftentimes mini church services that meet once a week, but now in a home, but they have real strict time constraints applied. Folks got to get their kids home. And they lay out a list of what folks are supposed to do now to look more missional when they get together. And then all of this quickly becomes and feels like new law. And they wonder, like, why is no one into this? I guess it just doesn't work here, And especially they're not yet believing friends who they're somewhat trying to do this for, who really don't want anything to do with these new religious activities. So see if you can feel this, okay, as I describe it.
Okay.
A group of friends and strangers from your church start getting together once a week, or maybe they already had a very self-focused small group, and now they start calling it a missional community. That sounds hipper. And they pretty much do what they have been doing before or at Bible studies, but now because they're supposed to be missional, they add in a service project once in a while, maybe once or twice a year,
Okay.
right? Which I've often heard people call, that's our mission. No, mission's making disciples. So
Yeah.
anyway. And then based on how well that all goes and how everybody's into it, how consistent attendance is at these weekly events, and if their lost neighbors, quote unquote, join them for this, well, then they feel successful or they feel like a failure. They're disappointed. They're tired of everyone's excuses, including feeling that way themselves. And they know that you, as their pastor or leaders, are disappointed. And they're pretty sure that, therefore, since they're not liking it and they're disappointed, you're not liking it and disappointed, God must be disappointed with them too in their performance, right?
Yeah.
Yikes. And so that's what I mean by do to be. In other words, they're trying to do something instead of be a people on mission and have their identity sort of speak into that, right?
Yeah. And I would sort of here even encourage people to really stop and kind of check what's going on in their heart, because I've had many conversations like this with friends or even people that, you're trying to train in disciple making, and you'll bring up the do to be topic and they're like, yeah, maybe there's a little bit of that, but not much. And I go, most of American, at least Christianity, is a lot of do to be.
It's filled
try
with it.
harder, work harder. And so you might be thinking, that doesn't really apply to me. And I would say, pump the brakes a little bit. I bet it actually is more ingrained in your identity than you would actually ever give it thought.
I think so. Because here's the thing. With religion, my identity, like you're saying, and self-worth are based mainly on how hard I work and how moral I am.
Sure.
And so I end up looking down on those that I think aren't as moral, or they seem lazier or whatever.
Yeah.
But see, the gospel truth is that my identity and self-worth are centered on the one Jesus who died for me. And I'm saved by sheer grace, and only by grace am I what I am. And I can live out of that. So a new list of activities to do in order to be missional and appear successful, or to be a good Christian or a good leader or pastor or to be a good church, it's actually anti the gospel. See, do to be is the total perverting of the gospel back into law, and it'll never work or produce lasting joy and fruit in people's lives.
Yeah.
So in this type of scenario, we as leaders, we may have unintentionally heaped loads of new anti-gospel missional activities on our leaders, asked them to do the same with their folks then, like go do what I'm doing to you with others, and actually push them away from the truth and grace that's already theirs in Christ.
But then we say we've tried being missional and it didn't work.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
And that's because, right back to what you're saying, Heath, because if we see life and I guess our religion as religion, and it's like what you do makes you a Christian, not what Christ did,
Yep.
and all that, then of course you're going to see it that way. You're
Sure.
going to say, well, we tried being missional by what we did, instead of no, it's an outflow of the gospel into all of our life. And one more thing to add here. The term missional, while it gets thrown around a lot with different meanings applied, is really about the one true mission that Jesus gave us, his family, okay, the church. And we've said it so many times on the show, that's making disciples. Mm-hmm. Being missional is about a lifestyle of discipleship, not a set of programs and things we do and new religious activities to talk people into doing together weekly. So another aspect I see connected to this idea that many leaders say they've tried this missional thing, which would in fact be a huge discipleship focus.
Sure.
But in reality, what they were trying to do was close the back door on Sundays and grow their Sunday service back like it was in the good old days, right?
Yeah.
So like they kind of gave it the nod there again. If we do this, maybe we can get people here. It's all doing to be, right? Like they didn't. And I've coached many leaders and churches and consulted like crazy, and church planning networks and all, where like, yeah, we want to do this missional thing. And the thing behind the thing, the longer we got into it, was so that we can fill back up Sunday. It wasn't so we can make disciples, so we can experience the gospel in everyday life, right? See, that's not being missional. That's really what I mean by they've just tried more religion and do to be activities. That's like the very epitome of it. But they've not helped people see and apply and enjoy the good news of the gospel to more and more of their lives together in a community, right?
Yeah.
No, that's not what's going on. So,
what's crazy is I'm thinking about this, and it hits close to home right now for me. I literally this morning was having a conversation with a church that I'm working with who, same thing, church was huge a couple years ago, have seen Christendom hit them pretty hard. People are leaving. They just spent 6 figures with a consultant to figure out how to redefine their mission statement, because they think that they've lost a little bit of a sense of
6 figures.
Yeah, over 100,000 for them to develop a 1-paragraph mission statement to try to like put the
I got to
on.
get in that business.
Me too, but I go like,
just give everybody the same one. Go and make disciples everywhere.
It's so simple.
Oh
and you think that's going to bring people back, but you got to come to the sense that like, Christendom's happening. We got to put our people and give them a missional impulse that says like, no, this is meant to be outside of the walls. Like, take this out.
What else do you think's going on here besides this sort of do to be distortion we've talked about? What else do you think is keeping people like not fully getting engaged before they kind of throw cold water on the thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's an overdependence on systems and not enough following the Spirit is a huge thing. We talk about following the Spirit quite a bit in word, but when you're like, no, let's actually try to live this out in day to day. It's a lot harder because the metrics you can't forecast the metrics on that as well because the Spirit's wild.
Right. And we've talked before too about leaders, not engaging the mission themselves, but trying to send everybody else out to. And that's a big part of it, right?
Prime example last week about the elders, right?
Oh,
if you haven't
man.
listened to 257, go back and listen to that one.
Woo. Yeah.
Yeah,
if you're still here listening, that was a strong
doozy.
episode. Yeah. No kidding. But I feel that because I already feel like, man, I'm so crazy busy, and all I hear from my people is how crazy busy I am. Am I willing to not do a whole bunch of stuff so that I can just be and be with people? And, like I've said it a lot, like the kingdom of God expands at the speed of relationship, and then the gospel moves along the lines of trust. That takes time.
Yeah.
And so there again, people say like, oh, we tried that whole missional thing. It's like a weekly meeting renamed a missional community where people aren't like even helped or trained to understand what does it look like to live out the gospel and apply it relationally. And guess what? If that don't start at your table and at your family level, then how are you going to do something with a whole bunch of people you barely know from church or a bunch of neighbors or not yet believing friends but they're leaning into relationship? How are you going to do that and live that life of the gospel soaking into everything? How are you going to do that with people if you've never even done it yourself, right?
Yeah, and I think it's not
abusive, like to send people out to do it and then feel bad about it that it didn't work. Like what,
Well, especially if you're not setting them up for success in the long. Like if you're running a church and you've already got your people serving Sundays and Wednesdays, and they're on worship team Thursday night practices, and they're in a Bible study on Tuesdays, and then you try to add a whole missional thing on top of that, like you're setting them up for failure, like just exhaustion.
Here's the thing too: when you make discipleship feel like it's one more choice on a list of Christian activities that people can do, well then you've basically said, well, you choose if you want to make disciples or not. Like you choose if you want to live out of the reality of your identity and Jesus' call and command to go and make disciples, because you can either do that or you can sing in the choir.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they're on the same exact level at a kingdom level.
Yeah.
That's not a shot against choirs. I love choirs. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
And we often do that. And then by what we talk about in our sermons or teaching or preaching or whatever, we very clearly communicate what the priority around here is.
Sure.
And the illustrations in our life fill up like, what are we really all about?
Yep.
And if they're all just sports and some wacky thing our kids did, but they're not about life on life and life in community and how we're learning to speak the good news to all the bad news that's happening.
Yeah.
And that's good, bad, funny, indifferent, all that, learning how to fight and forgive and all that.
Yep.
Well, then we're broadcasting something very loudly, aren't we?
Yeah.
And people pick up on it. They go, well, this missional thing, this lifestyle of discipleship, I guess it's an optional thing because, I said the prayer, I'm in. So I guess I can just wait around till Jesus gets back.
Well, and I think too with the missional movement, anything missional, you have to be fairly intentional about it too. I mean, it's a constant awareness of
highly intentional.
Yeah, like in your neighborhood, when are my neighbors coming home? What are they into? What are they not into? What's their rhythm? And one of the things that I love that you're actually doing is you're actually coaching people that want to be intentional, right?
Mostly what I do is we help people live this life. We consult and coach, and we don't get to do it with a whole ton of people because we give so much of our day and time, minutes, and hours to this every day. And so, we have this everyday disciple makers coaching. We'll get to do, private coaching and accountability, like one-on-one consultations, pull a roadmap for folks together. And they're getting a whole lot of access to Tina and I as a small group of people. And we're going to be like, we train and teach, but we're really helping people transform their belief of their identity and their gospel fluency, and then learn how to fit that all into their everyday life. Right?
And what I love about this, this is not a one-size-fits-all shoot for everybody. Like you actually really intentional, which is part of your meeting with them, kind of getting a game plan. And I think next week we're actually going to have somebody on the show that you've worked with that develops disciples in a really unique, specific way.
Yeah.
But what you've done is you've said, what's your life consist of? what about these activities? Let's marry
Your
them.
passion is going to drive that, and God's given you those. Yep.
Yeah, you're not just taking everyone through another resource manual that fits for everybody. Like this is very custom.
If you're here, if you're a leader and you're listening to this of any sort, and by the way, you're all leaders. Some of you are being paid to be leaders. Some of you are at churches doing the Bivo thing,
Yeah.
right? And some of you are leading just quote unquote your families, right?
Sure.
I want you to hear, like, please don't pile a bunch of do to be stuff on others,
Yeah.
but take the time and investment to actually learn a much bigger gospel, right? Growing your gospel fluency. I'd love to help you do that. And then let the rings of that lifestyle change start to move out to like some other folks in your church. And then now you're teaching from authentic, experience, right?
Yeah.
You're not just talking about what others need to go out and do. And I want to help you do that. I really do. If you want to learn more about how that works, or hop on a call with us,
Yeah.
then you get to, okay? Like if you go to everydaydisciple.com/coaching, right, in your browser, that'll take you to a page where it kind of explains the whole thing, asks you a few questions, and you can sign up just to hop on a call with us. And
Yeah,
I'm
see
not
what
asking you
works,
to
yeah.
pull out a credit card or any of that kind of stuff. I'm just not,
Yeah.
I just want to see, hey, can we help you? Can we help you help your people start to really live this instead of just saying, well, we tried it and it failed. And, I feel like there's like three kinds of people. There's people that just go, well, yeah, we tried all that stuff. It's just not what our folks are into. And that's
Sure.
where they stop. There's those that say, well, we'd like to, but we're just too busy for it. And I think we're just going to kind of try to guess our way through it, right?
Sure.
Or it's too expensive, I can't do that.
Yep.
And then there's those who will just choose to do nothing, which is actually a choice in itself.
Yeah.
Choosing
You're
to do
absolutely right.
nothing is really choosing the status quo. And so, I just want to say, unless your folks are ripping it up and you've got reproducible systems, please don't just stay there. This is too big. This is too important to why we exist and to God's glory. So I'd love to be able to help you with that. So
Cool. Yeah. That's everydaydisciple.com/coaching.
at least check it out and hop on a phone call with me. Okay. And let's just talk about it and I'll help you either way. All right.
Sweet, man. Hey, let's get to the big three. As always, we want to leave you with the big three takeaways from today's show. If nothing else, things we do not want you to miss. Maybe you're driving and couldn't write this down. So we're going to give it to you as a printable PDF for free.
I can't write.
By going to everydaydisciple.com/big three. Caesar, what'd you come up with as a big three for this week?
Okay, real fast. Here we go. First, experiencing the good news of the gospel in all of life is what discipleship's really about. Okay, regardless of what you want to call it. Missional's not a dirty word or dead or something to fear. Okay.
Yep.
But new law and religion is. So don't
That's
just
good.
do to be people. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
And say, well, that didn't work. It won't work. That's religion's dead. Law, right? Killed. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, second thing, don't miss. Religion teaches that my identity and self-worth are based mainly on how hard I work, right? Or how hard you work.
Sure.
But gospel truth is that your identity and self-worth are centered on Jesus, who already did everything that's required for you to live as a dearly loved, redeemed son or daughter of God, okay? And helping others see and believe and experience that too, that's a high privilege. It's a high calling.
Yeah.
And it's one that's never going to go away. It's never going to go out of vogue. It's not, it doesn't matter what we call it, right?
No, you're right.
And the third thing I'd say is, get started growing in a deeper knowledge and experience of the gospel in everyday life. Like really, like as a leader, as a pastor, as a Christian, move the gospel out of the church building, right?
Yep.
And be careful of how much missional activity, quote unquote, you try to do or prescribe to others until you've helped your people grow in their gospel identity. I've seen too many people, like they'll hear us teach on like the daily rhythms of discipleship. And then they like, oh, we totally ganked those. We changed a few words, but then we got everybody doing them. And then they burned out. It's like, don't do that, okay?
Yeah.
They have to grow in their gospel identity first. This is where new motivations and rhythms start to naturally flow out of the gospel, out of our identity. And if your current version of missional community life's not feeling like a gift from God, okay, and it's something, it's not feeling vibrant and growing, get the help you need to change that today. Okay, this is too important to just nod our heads in agreement and keep doing the same religious activities. A life of great adventure and freedom that glorifies God awaits you. Okay,
Yeah, that's amazing
Really,
news.
like it's too big to just, well, yeah, you're right, but get the help you need. Okay, and so again, if nothing else, go to everydaydisciple.com/coaching. Check it all out. I'm here to help you, and I know I can, and God deserves that. God deserves the glory of us living this out in everyday life, not just, we tried it, it doesn't work. No, it will. Jesus promised.
Yep, that's great, man. Thanks for joining us today. For more information on this show and to get loads of free discipleship resources, visit everydaydisciple.com. And remember, you really can live with the spiritual freedom and relational peace that Jesus promised every day.